Why your suffering might be your greatest gift. The Buddhist paradox most people miss. You know what's fascinating? We spend our entire lives trying to avoid pain, building walls around ourselves, carefully constructing a world where nothing bad can touch us. And yet, if you look at the most remarkable people throughout history, the ones who've achieved genuine wisdom and deep contentment, almost all of them went through absolute hell first. There's something we're getting fundamentally wrong about suffering, and it's keeping most of us trapped in a cycle of disappointment and frustration that we don't even realize we're in. Today, I want to share with you a completely different way of understanding why difficult things happen, one that comes from ancient Buddhist wisdom but has profound implications for how we navigate modern life. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending everything is fine when it's not. This is about understanding a deeper truth that once you see it, changes everything. Here's the thing most people don't understand about Buddhist teachings on suffering. When the Buddha talked about life being characterized by suffering, he wasn't being pessimistic or depressing. He was pointing to something much more subtle and honestly kind of liberating. The word often translated as suffering, dukkha, actually means something closer to unsatisfactoriness or the inability to get lasting satisfaction from things that are constantly changing. Think about it this way. Every single thing you're experiencing right now, everything you can see, touch, think, or feel is in a constant state of flux. Your body is literally different than it was when you started listening to this. Your thoughts are racing through your mind like clouds across the sky. The people you love are changing. Your circumstances are shifting. Nothing, absolutely nothing, stays the same. And here's where it gets interesting. Our natural instinct is to try to freeze things in place, to control outcomes, to make the good times last forever and the bad times disappear instantly. But that's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. Now, let me take you deeper into why this matters for your actual life right now. When something genuinely painful happens, when you lose something important or face a serious setback, your mind immediately goes into story-making mode. It starts asking questions like, why me? What did I do to deserve this? Why do I always have such bad luck? Notice what's happening there. Your mind is trying to make sense of random events by creating a narrative where you're the protagonist of some cosmic story, where there's a reason, a purpose, some grand design behind your suffering. And here's the uncomfortable truth that Buddhist philosophy forces us to confront. There isn't. The universe doesn't have a personal vendetta against you, but it also doesn't have a special plan to make everything work out for you. You're not being tested. You're not being punished. You're not going through this difficulty because you need to learn a specific lesson that some cosmic teacher has designed for you. You're experiencing this because you're alive, and life inherently involves change, loss, and circumstances beyond your control. But here's where this gets really interesting, and this is the part that can actually transform how you experience your life. Once you truly accept that life doesn't owe you fairness, that there's no cosmic accounting system ensuring good things happen to good people, something remarkable happens. You stop wasting enormous amounts of emotional energy on resentment and confusion. Think about how much mental bandwidth you've used up asking, why is this happening to me? Or this isn't fair? Or I don't deserve this. All of that energy is essentially you arguing with reality, trying to negotiate with circumstances that have already occurred. It's like standing in the rain, getting increasingly angry that you're getting wet, instead of just acknowledging you're in the rain and figuring out your next move. Now, I want to address something crucial that often gets missed in discussions about acceptance and Buddhist teachings. Accepting that life is unfair and that suffering is inevitable doesn't mean becoming passive or defeated. It doesn't mean you stop trying to improve your circumstances or that you just roll over when bad things happen. This is where a lot of people get confused and think Buddhism is promoting some kind of fatalistic resignation. Nothing could be further from the truth. What it means is that you stop adding a second layer of suffering on top of your actual difficulties. Let me explain what I mean by this. When something bad happens, there's the actual event itself, the primary pain. Maybe you lost your job, or a relationship ended, or you're dealing with a health issue. That's real, and it genuinely hurts. But then there's this whole additional layer of suffering we pile on top through our thoughts and expectations. The "this shouldn't be happening," the "why me?" the comparing yourself to others who seem to have it easier, the catastrophizing about the future, the replaying of the past. This second layer of suffering is often far more painful than the actual event itself, and it's completely self-created through our resistance to reality. Here's a practical example of how this plays out. Imagine two people lose their jobs on the same day, same situation, same circumstances. Person A spends the next several weeks consumed by thoughts about how unfair it is, how they didn't deserve this, how their life is ruined, how nothing ever goes right for them. They can barely function because they're so caught up in the story their mind is telling about what this means about them and their future. Person B, who's internalized these Buddhist principles, certainly feels the disappointment and fear. They're not pretending those emotions don't exist, but they're able to think, okay, this is what's happening right now. It's difficult, and I don't like it, but it's not evidence that the universe hates me or that my life is over. It's just a thing that happened. Now what's my next move? Who do you think recovers faster? Who do you think is more likely to find a new opportunity? The difference isn't in their circumstances, it's in how much additional suffering they're creating through their relationship with those circumstances. Now let's talk about this concept of bringing your focus from negativity to positivity, because this is where people often get it wrong and end up with that toxic positivity I mentioned earlier. It's not about pretending bad things aren't happening or forcing yourself to be happy when you're genuinely struggling. That's just another form of resistance to reality. Instead, it's about training yourself to see the full picture rather than just the parts your mind is obsessively highlighting. Our brains have what's called a negativity bias. From an evolutionary perspective, this made sense. The ancestor who was constantly on the lookout for threats was more likely to survive than the one who was just enjoying the sunset when a predator was nearby. But in modern life, this bias means our minds naturally emphasize what's wrong, what's missing, what's threatening, even when the actual data of our lives includes plenty of neutral or positive elements. So when you practice bringing your focus to the bright side, you're not denying reality. You're actually seeing reality more accurately by deliberately noticing what your biased brain tends to filter out. Here's something that might blow your mind. In any given moment of your life, there are probably hundreds of things that are going reasonably well that you're completely ignoring because your brain doesn't flag them as important. Right now, as you're listening to this, your heart is beating, your lungs are working, you have access to technology that would have seemed like magic to people a century ago. You're not currently experiencing severe physical pain. You have the leisure time to think about philosophical concepts rather than fighting for your immediate survival. None of this means you can't also have real problems and challenges, but when your mind is trained to only see what's wrong, you're literally not perceiving huge chunks of your actual experience. And here's what's wild. When you start deliberately noticing what's going okay, what's working, what's even just neutral, you're not just making yourself feel better, you're actually rewiring your brain's default patterns. Neuroscience backs this up. The pathways you use most frequently become stronger. If you spend all your time thinking about what's wrong, you're essentially training your brain to be an expert at finding problems. If you practice noticing what's okay or good, even while acknowledging difficulties, you're training your brain to have a more balanced and accurate perception of reality. But here's the deepest level of this teaching, and this is what really shifts everything. The Buddha taught that expecting things which are under others' control to go your way is itself a form of suffering. Think about how much of your happiness depends on things you have absolutely no control over. Other people's decisions, economic conditions, random chance, your genetic predispositions, global events. When you attach your sense of well-being to outcomes you can't control, you're essentially signing up for a lifetime of anxiety and disappointment. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're trying to do something impossible. You're trying to control the uncontrollable. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to radically shift where you place your sense of security and well-being. Instead of basing it on circumstances staying a certain way or people behaving how you want them to, you base it on something you actually do have influence over: how you relate to your experience. Can you develop the capacity to remain grounded and clear-headed regardless of external circumstances? Can you cultivate the ability to experience disappointment without adding layers of drama and story on top of it? Can you build the resilience to face difficulties without falling apart or losing your fundamental sense of being okay? This is what the metaphor about the book chapters is really pointing to. Life will include sad chapters. That's not a bug, it's a feature. It's not evidence that something has gone wrong or that you're cursed or that you're doing life incorrectly. It's just the nature of a complete life. And here's the thing about stopping at the sad chapters. You're not actually avoiding the sadness. The sad chapter already happened. By ruminating on it, replaying it, building your identity around it, you're actually extending that sad chapter indefinitely. You're living in it over and over again, even as new chapters are trying to unfold. The courage isn't in pretending the sad chapter didn't happen. The courage is in acknowledging it fully, feeling what needs to be felt, learning what can be learned, and then turning the page to see what comes next. Because here's what the metaphor misses. Unlike a book where the chapters are already written, you have some influence over what the next chapters of your life look like. Not complete control. Remember, life will throw you curveballs. But your choices, your responses, your willingness to keep moving forward, these things matter. They shape what's possible. So if you're going through something difficult right now, here's what this Buddhist perspective offers you. It offers you permission to stop fighting with reality, to stop asking, why me, and instead ask, what now? It offers you freedom from the exhausting expectation that life should be fair, which allows you to engage with life as it actually is, rather than as you wish it would be. It offers you a framework for experiencing pain without creating additional suffering through resistance and story. And perhaps most importantly, it offers you a path to genuine resilience, not the fake kind where you pretend to be tough, but the real kind where you can bend without breaking, where you can feel the full weight of difficulty without being crushed by it. This isn't easy. It's actually one of the hardest things you can do, which is why so few people truly do it. It's much easier to stay stuck in victimhood, to keep telling the story about how unfair everything is, to keep expecting life to finally give you what you deserve. But that path leads to a lifetime of disappointment. The Buddhist path requires you to grow up in a profound way, to take responsibility for your inner experience, even when you can't control outer circumstances. And that, paradoxically, is where real freedom lives.